Because Star Trek's characters are beloved by so many people, some of the actors have gotten very attached to who they play on the show, and rightly so. But often actors' visions for their characters have been overshadowed by the vision of the writers and the studio executives. This has actually caused a lot of drama behind the scenes that audiences aren't typically aware of. A number of issues like plot lines that come out of nowhere and alien concepts that make no logical sense could have been avoided if the people in charge had been more open to feedback from the cast. Others simply suffered from bad writing and a lack of character development. Whatever their reasons, here are 8 scenes from Star Trek that the actors absolutely hated shooting. Number 8. The first appearance of the Ferengi. Many fans don't know this, but one of the first Ferengi ever seen on Star Trek in the Next Generation episode The Last Outpost was actually played by Armin Shimmerman, the actor who went on to play Quark in Deep Space Nine. Unfortunately for Shimmerman, this performance went on to haunt him. As he explained to GameSpot at the time, the Ferengi were not yet fully developed into the species we know today. During the early episodes of The Next Generation, they were originally intended to be more menacing, scary, and actual enemies of the Federation. But Shimmerman played up to the evil factor perhaps a bit too much, and as a result, ended up portraying the Ferengi as incredibly one-dimensional and a bit silly during his first appearance. When Deep Space Nine began and the studio was looking for someone to play their new recurring Ferengi character, Quark, Shimmerman auditioned 3 times before getting the role. And even though we eventually got to see more of the Ferengi and their culture throughout Deep Space Nine, it's fair to say that he set the tone. Number 7. Dr. Bashir's secret being revealed. In the episode Dr. Bashir, I presume, from Season 5 of Deep Space Nine, it was revealed that Dr. Julian Bashir was genetically modified by his parents when he was about 7 years old to have superior physical and mental abilities. We learned that Bashir struggled with learning at a young age, quickly falling behind all of his peers at school. So his parents gave him illegal genetic enhancements. I could do with some of those. Hoping to give him a chance at a brighter future, but had to keep it a secret, as genetic manipulation was banned in the Federation. It was a big surprise, and many fans saw it as fun and interesting. A new direction for Bashir's character even, because prior to this, audiences had criticised him for being an annoying know-it-all, always hitting on Dax, and I think learning this secret about him made him seem a little bit more human, and all of his behaviour a little bit more justified maybe. However, Alexander Siddig, who played the Doctor, disagreed. Siddig only learned of Bashir's secret mere days before filming began on the episode, and he was devastated that the writers would include such an important reveal for his character without even consulting him once. To get back at the execs, he said he purposefully put minimal effort into the recording of the episode and protested for Bashir's genetic modifications to be largely ignored afterwards, though they do occasionally come into play in the later series. Number 6. Jadzia's death scene. When Star Trek Deep Space Nine neared the end of its 6th season and the show was coming to a close, Terry Farrell, who played Jadzia Dax on nearly every episode thus far, requested to have her appearance made less frequent on the show so she could have time to pursue other roles. Unsurprisingly, the producers denied this request and gave Farrell only 2 options. Jadzia remains as a lead character, or she gets killed off. Farrell chose the latter, which resulted in an RKO-style death scene where Jadzia is killed by the Par-Wraith-possessed Gul Dukat in the episode Tears of the Prophets. Admittedly, this was a shocking surprise and led to many interesting stories with Dax's new host Ezri, which I found progressive in some ways, but Terry Farrell was disappointed that her character had to die so abruptly. It's likely that the writers had already thought about Dax having a symbiote move to a new host, as throughout the whole series we've been learning about her past lives and we always knew that one day she would transfer to somebody else. Number 5. Chakotay and 7 of 9's romance. During Season 7 of Star Trek Voyager, 7 of 9 really made progress on regaining her humanity. As the series came to a close, 7 began forming strong friendships and even experimenting with romance on the holodeck in that episode called Human Error. This episode, and the one that followed, Natural Law, started toying with the idea of 7 and Chakotay developing feelings for each other. But when Jerry Ryan, who played 7 of 9, asked the producers if they were going to include a romance between the 2 characters, they responded, absolutely not. So of course, it annoyed Ryan when she was surprised by a sudden random scene that was included at the beginning of Voyager's finale, Endgame, in which 7 and Chakotay were seen to be like dating out of the blue, presumably madly in love with each other. Ryan was told specifically not to play into the romance between her character and Robert Beltran, but the producers still went ahead and included it. Likely they were just trying to add some tactless conclusion to 7's story. Luckily though, in the first season of Picard, we get to see a more human version of Seven without her need of a forced romance to prove it. Number 4, the dance from Move Along Home. Deep Space Nine, like most other Trek shows, started off with a rather lackluster first season. But you know, things get going after a little while. However, no episode fully encapsulates the show's early failings as much as Move Along Home. In the episode, an alien delegation from the Gamma Quadrant visited the station and brought aboard this mysterious game which they eventually convinced Quark to play. Quark didn't realise, however, that Cisco, Dax, Bashir and Kira were kidnapped from the station and put into this simulation game. They were also controlled by his choices in the game. Eventually, he learned that they were taken and saw that failure in the game could lead to their deaths. This was a really cool idea for a story and definitely one of the most unique episodes of season 1, but it was executed in a way that was just weird. In 2013, Avery Brooks said that he particularly disliked the weird alien dance he and the others were forced to do inside the game, all whilst hopping around and singing that ridiculous song, "A la mare, count to 4, a 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 la mare." And I've remixed it, haven't I? I've made it into an Afrobeat song, but a la mare, count to 4. Number 3, Dr. Crusher's weird ghost romance. Gates McFadden, who played Dr. Crusher, hated the Next Generation episode Sub Rosa, and, well, most people found it peculiar, at least. This episode was so ridiculous. I mean, she f***s a ghost. Wait, you know what? I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's roll this back a bit. Dr. Crusher gets a family heirloom from her recently deceased grandmother. The small candlelight device then activates when she's alone and releases an alien entity known as Ronin, who Crusher, well, she f***s him. She does. I mean, she has romantic relations with him, if you want to put it in a better sense of words, but the scenes portraying their intimacy were hilariously overacted by McFadden, who, of course, realised how profoundly absurd the plot was for this episode. It gets even worse. Later in the episode, her grandmother's dead body is possessed by Ronin, and we learn that this same alien entity has been seducing people in her family for generations. The scenes between Crusher and Ronin are awkward, hilarious, and painful to watch, and McFadden has talked often in the past about how laughable she found them at the time. Number 2, the holodeck scenes in Star Trek Enterprise finale. When Star Trek Enterprise was cancelled in 2005, the cast as well as the audiences hoped that the show would at least get a good conclusion for some of the main plot lines that were set up over the series. By the last series, we had things going on like the Temporal Cold War, the Xindi War, and all of the side stories, and they all had to hastily be completed. A few of my Trek mates would say that the early cancellation of a show is what prevented it from ever really taking off as much as other Star Trek installments over the years. If they were given more time, the plot lines could have been resolved more elegantly. The final episode made things even worse, particularly with the prevalence of Jonathan Frakes, who returns as our good old chair-hopping Riker, watching a historical holodeck program about the end of Archer's journey with the first Enterprise. It's good to see Riker, Troy and the old Enterprise D again, but having Riker interject with commentary or just stare at the Enterprise characters as they go through some of the most emotional moments for them in the series was presumably seen as insulting by Bakula, who never voiced his concern, but according to Brannon Braga, was very displeased by the finale. Frakes has gone on to say that he believes his presence in the finale took away from the main cast moment. Number 1, Captain Kirk's death scene. One scene that most fans will find hard to watch for one reason or another is Captain Kirk's death scene in Star Trek Generations. James T. Kirk is one of the most renowned Starfleet officers in history, both in lore and in the eyes of us fans. Unfortunately, through his death in the 7th Star Trek film, it was hardly the send-off that the character deserved. In Generations, Kirk was lost in a timeless dimension of pure happiness known as the Nexus, and is pulled back into reality by Picard and killed by falling to his death by fighting Tolian Soren, a man who Kirk has never met and has no history with. Not to mention, Picard could have re-emerged from the Nexus at any point in time, even days before the battle with Saran, which made Kirk's death seem completely avoidable. It shouldn't surprise anyone to learn that William Shatner was also not happy with his character's unceremonious death. Shatner explained to TrekMovie.com that the only reason he agreed to perform this scene was because the creative leads told him the only options were to do this scene like they wanted or to make it happen off screen. It was definitely cool to see Kirk and Picard teaming up for the first time, but Kirk's death should have been more personal to his character, not a quick torch pass to the next generation. So there you have it, 8 Star Trek scenes that the actors hated shooting. If you've got something to add to the conversation, let us know in the comments below. And of course, like and subscribe. You can find us on Twitter at TrekCulture. And I am on all social medias at Marcus Bronzy, MarcusBronzy, and also twitch.tv/Marcus Bronzy, where I'm streaming Monday to Fridays. I also got a podcast called Ain't Got a Clue. Go find out where you listen to yours.